This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about from the continent and beyond. But first, a quick update on the market. So there's a flood of red ink pretty much across the bourses we do track on the program today. Top 40, the JSE fell by over 900 points, down 1.5% for the second consecutive session. Mining firm Goldfields was actually down by over 7%. AngloGold Ashanti not far behind with a near 6% decline. Richmond, Naspers and Prosus accounted for the bulk of the index decline today. Across in East Africa, the agricultural firm Kakuzi issued a profit warning today, partly with avocado output and pricing to blame. We'll cover the details on that in the next 10 minutes, but there was virtually no response at the bourse. It was essentially unchanged, $3.70 a share today. In 2021, that company's share price went up by at least 16%. Here's what's coming up tonight. The Africa CDC is ruling out lockdowns as a primary control measure to respond to COVID-19. Ethiopia's finance ministry seeking approval to spend $2.5 billion in a supplementary budget. And President Biden has blamed his predecessor, Donald Trump, over attacks in the capital. Now, let's start in the continental response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Africa's top public health official says that the period of using severe lockdowns as a primary pandemic response tool is over. John Kengasong, the director of the Africa CDC, says that these lockdowns are no longer the best way to contain COVID. Instead, Africa CDC is calling for the use of a range of public health and social measures as vaccination rates gradually rise across the continent. Right now, over 321 million vaccines have been administered across Africa. Under 10% of Africans are fully vaccinated. Kengasong also praised South Africa for adopting a data-driven response to its latest infection wave. South Africa experienced a very steep rise in COVID-19 infections from late November, around the time it alerted the world to the Omicron variant of COVID. That wave peaked in mid-December, and the government there did not resort to strict restrictions as it had done in previous waves.
We are very encouraged with what we saw in South Africa during this period, where they look at the data in terms of severity, and they actually did what we are encouraging countries to do, to really say that the period where we were using lockdown as a tool, severe lockdown as a tool, is over. We should actually be looking at how we use public health and social measures more carefully and in a balanced way as the vaccination increases. Unless and until by the end of this year, the continent actually scale up its vaccination to above 70 or 80%, my worry is that we might actually be at the end of this year into a scenario where COVID becomes endemic.
So let's explore that in a bit more detail. Anthony Mveyange is the Executive Director of the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research. He joins us now live on the program. So severe lockdowns do come with an unacceptably high economic cost, but what should policymakers be doing in its place?
Oh, thank you very much. I think there are a few things that policymakers can pay attention to. Allow me to mention a few. One is strengthening public and health and social measures. And here we're looking at things. How do they do vaccines, for example, access to remote areas? How do we increase awareness to talk about the need for public to understand and appreciate the urgency for vaccination, access to COVID-19 and its logistics, testing, mass testing particularly, very important, a quick turnaround. So that's one area to think about. There could also be rooms for technological innovation to think about, and we are looking at lockdown more broadly here, not necessarily because of the COVID vaccination, but also to think about the remote working, schooling, and how do we help public health, public schools to actually function and not to impose lockdown. We are talking about businesses for SMEs, e-commerce. How do we support them? How do we build the infrastructure that is needed? How do we build the right connectivity that is needed? And how do we make access to these infrastructure and connectivity affordable for common citizens to be able to access them, but most importantly is actually to demystify the COVID vaccine hesitance.
Let's dig into that in a bit more detail, because you mentioned awareness in your initial response. Have governments done enough? Are they doing enough, especially in the last year, to essentially say, look, we need this vaccination for this specific purpose. It is safe, it is effective, because we're seeing a lot of misinformation flying around in WhatsApp groups, especially up and down the continent. Are governments doing enough to counter it?
Yes, so I think there's so much information, and I like what the way you use misinformation. And I think how do we then build the trust? I think the challenges that African governments have been facing is how do you build the trust in the era of misinformation? Whatever is coming around from whether the government, from outside. So I think credibility of the information that is being shared is very, very critical. And if this information is coming from the sources that people trust is very key. And that is when we can think about people accepting, because as you rightly said, misinformation misguide people. But how can government counter such misinformation? By having credible sources of information that are coming from credible sources and authorities within the government machinery. That is key. And to avoid what we have seen in Africa, a lot of nuances across the different countries. How do we speak as one? How do we bring the different experiences from the different countries in terms of how information is shared, in terms of how information is consumed by the public, and how does the government speak in unison to address some of the misinformation? But
just along those specific lines, because some of the things that we're seeing now is that, the whole idea of vaccination tends to be approached in a very heavy-handed manner. It's a government saying you must get vaccinated, that's it, no discussion around it. You're seeing policies coming through making vaccination mandatory. But is that really the best way of getting more and more people vaccinated, especially in an environment where there's low trust between citizens on one hand and policymakers and governments that have really not been investing in public health care for decades? If policymakers are going to show up and say you must get vaccinated, they're going to run into resistance.
Of course, they will. I think it needs to public dialogues at the lower level, the community, for people to buy in. We have had other vaccines in Africa. We have had cholera vaccines, we have had yellow fever vaccines, and people take their kids for vaccines. But why is it so easy for parents, for example, to allow their children to be vaccinated, but it's very difficult for them to go for COVID vaccines? I think it has to do with it's a process. It's not a one thing you can just hand it down and say, hey, today we want you to vaccine. It's a process to engage. The government need to engage the citizens. They need to understand what are the benefits of being vaccinated. Why is it important? And given the misinformation, given the fact that some of these vaccines are associated with some side effects, the government has a duty, the governments have a duty to actually enlighten the citizens and say, these are the benefits, these are the disadvantages of being vaccinated. What does it mean for your community? What does it mean for your people? And engage the citizen. Because in the end, it's not about what the government wants, it's about the people. Even the government themselves, they are people. It's not like government is a machinery. So they are people. You just need to convince the people the same way politicians are able to convince people, vote for me. So you need to have an agenda. You need to have a very clearly articulated proposal. Why is it important for citizens to actually be vaccinated? Right. What are the benefits for the country? What are the benefits for the individuals?
Okay, one last question for you, because I'm running out of time here. But the latest data that I've looked at from the Africa CDC shows that we've used up nearly 60% of the total vaccine supplies that we've acquired pretty much across the continent. You've covered some of the vaccine hesitancy factors, explaining some of that slow uptake. But what else are the problems in getting a lot more of these vaccinations into the arms of millions across Africa?
Yes, I mean, I'll categorize into two categories. One, the demand side, the hesitance, the trust, the social norms that we talked about. But I think the most important is the supply side, the infrastructure that is needed to map where the vaccine is needed. Most of the Africans are in remote areas. So far, the focus has mainly been in urban areas. What about the remote areas that cannot be easily accessed? Do government have the infrastructure that is needed to be able to access the logistics that are needed for these vaccines to reach many people? Okay, what about the technology on the supply side? Can the government invent new ways of thinking and doing things to actually reach out to majority of Africans who cannot access these vaccines easily? So I think the focus should be pivoted towards the rural areas where majority of Africans are, where infrastructure is challenging, logistics are challenging. If these are addressed together with the demand side interventions, I think we will get something positive.
All right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Anthony Mveyange, the Executive Director of the Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, thank you very much for your time this evening. Now, let's move on to Uganda. Hoteliers over there are trying to make their businesses more competitive in the wake of the lifting of pandemic restrictions on pretty much all sectors of the economy. Uganda's hospitality sector, though, is facing a very steep uphill task here in recovery, not just from the pandemic's economic damage, but also from some of the continent's strictest pandemic response. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
At this hotel in the suburbs of Kampala, preparations are underway to welcome guests once again. It's a new beginning for some after Uganda's president lifted COVID-19 restrictions on all sectors of the economy.
We have to first lower down our price list where we are prepared, because if we are now to go back and maintain the other usual price that we had, most of our clients are now not affording.
Dropping their prices is just one tactic being used by hoteliers to try and attract business in what is a hugely competitive industry. Hotel owners here are renovating their places to attract more customers. Their hope is to recover from the effects of the pandemic as the economy slowly picks up. That financial recovery should mean more business coming in, but experts say the process may take a while. Travel for both locals and foreigners is currently being affected by the spread of the Omicron variant of COVID-19. The government is pushing for increased vaccination to try and overcome this latest challenge.
Now we have the vaccines. Kindly Ugandans go and get vaccinated. That's the only game changer, so that we can fully reopen the schools, reopen the businesses, especially the night economy. I would want to see it functioning so that we can be able to fully recover.
The road to recover remains a bumpy one. Hotels have struggled with operation costs. Any attempt to get back on their feet requires extra support.
To recover, maybe when the government produce for us tax, or say, the hotel, I think you people we are first giving you 2 years, don't pay tax. At least for us to come up also, and
The Uganda government has set aside a recovery fund of about $56 million for small businesses to borrow at lower interest rates. For hotels like this one, such relief may be the help they need in what remains very uncertain times. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, Ghana aims to introduce a form of its digital currency, the e-cedi, which would work offline through smart cards. Now, Ghana Central Bank did start running pilot tests on the e-cedi last year, but it's yet to officially roll out this particular currency, if you will, to the wider public. Now, as a global trade in use of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum continues to grow, analysts now want a lot more awareness to be raised about the e-cedi before it gets out to the general public. CGTN's Ridwan Karim Dini Osman reports from Accra.
Ghana partnered with foreign tech companies last year to explore its own version of an electronic currency known as e-cedi. The central bank wants to catch up with a growing trend of digital payments, but the government has warned people against trading with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin because it is unregulated by the central bank.
Last year alone, I can understand that there were almost about 6-7 different twists to the industry, different fall times, different currencies. I mean, almost about 8,000 new coins, proper coins, were rolled out into the system. And so away from just the Bank of Ghana cryptocurrency coin that is being released, there are also competing coins that are around it, and people would, whilst they understand the governmental coin, they're also looking out for the other options that are there. And so it's essential that if you're protecting the interest of the citizenry in terms of finances, you sort of engage them around everything that it comes up with.
Nearly 16 million people in Ghana are connected to the internet, about half of its total population. Ghana hopes its offline digital currency that would allow people use their smart cards could boost digital payments without the need for internet connectivity. Analysts want the central bank to ensure that it is well regulated to reduce the threats of fraud.
If I have to buy a coin, which is not the Gulf coin that is released, but if I have to buy a coin that is already on the market, like Bitcoin or Ethereum or BTT, it will be easier because there's a regulation around it, who I can buy it from, how I can buy it from, what form I can pay, what kind of exchange rate I could be. Because technology is not waiting for us. People are cashing in on this as much as they can. And so regulation does it for me.
Still, Ghana has yet to roll out the use of its digital currency after testing it last year. The central bank says it is trying to determine whether it is safe to release the e-cedi on a broader scale for transactions. Redwan Karim Dini Osman, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Right, then a quick run through some company news. Let's start in East Africa. The Kenyan-listed agricultural firm Kakuzi has issued a profit warning and a cautionary statement to the market. The firm says its net earnings for the year ending December 31st, 2021 will be at least a quarter lower compared to a year earlier. Board Chair Nicholas Nganga says that the profit warning arises from trading information, market forecasts and preliminary unaudited full-year numbers. Avocado output for the firm apparently last year was 18% lower year-on-year, with a surge in production from Peru and Colombia depressing prices in the market that operates in Europe. Now, the Ghanaian health tech startup M-Pharma plans to set up more pharmacies to widen its reach after raising $35 million in a Series D funding round. The startup plans to grow its community pharmacies across 8 African countries to make them the first point of care for patients. Now, these mini hospitals, if you will offer a wide range of services, including medical consultation, diagnostic and telehealth services, while increasing access to affordable healthcare. The South African breweries has started consultations on mandatory COVID vaccinations for its employees. This will put it on a growing list of companies that are taking a much tougher stance on the jab. Lucia Swartz, the Vice President of People at SAB, says that the company is currently engaging with unions as well as suppliers and government partners to determine whether having a mandatory vaccination policy across its operations will be of value. And finally, the clothing and homeware retailer Next says it will raise its prices this year to offset increased wages and higher shipping costs. Now, the company says its prices for its spring and summer clothing and homeware ranges will rise by just under 4%. It expects a 6% rise for its autumn and winter goods. Its forecast came as it said sales in the fourth quarter were up 20% compared to 2019. That's the run for your company headlines. We're 17 minutes into the hour. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up. We'll be taking a look at Ethiopia's proposal for $2.5 billion supplementary budget. And China and Kenya pen 6 new deals looking to bolster trade between both sides.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
A little tense here. Bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas. So it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
the front line. Within clear view of this front line position.
Welcome back. Let's head over to Ethiopia. The Finance Ministry has proposed a supplementary budget worth about $2.5 billion in order to deal with the fallout from a 14-month-long civil war that has destroyed infrastructure, displaced millions, eroded government revenue and deterred investment. CGTN's Girum Chala reports from the capital.
The Ethiopian civil war has lasted almost 14 months. It has claimed thousands of lives and led to the eviction of at least 2.5 million people. Now the Ethiopian government has proposed to allocate an additional $2.47 billion to rebuild the war-torn north regions of the country and revamp its entire economy.
We have to work hard to support our people affected by the war, and that includes their families and also those families that have lost their loved ones in this conflict. Apart from government efforts, we expect the people of our country to be mindful of their spending habits and to avoid any excessive spending as much as possible. We must practice the culture of saving and supporting one another too as Ethiopians. That way, our all-rounded efforts can bear fruit.
Already, Ethiopian authorities have confirmed services such as telecommunications, electric and others have resumed in the war-affected regions of the country.
In most of the freed and recaptured areas, services such as telecom, electricity and banks are back for the public. Of course, there are a few places where services are yet to resume, but most areas now have begun to get normal services after strong efforts exerted towards reinstating these areas. The Ethiopian Airlines has also resumed its flights to the cities of Kombolcha and Lalibela. Our special Christmas will also be celebrated in the historic Lalibela city. This will be a great opportunity for those believers to witness the current condition of the churches after the invasion.
Ethiopia has already a plan of vast economic growth under Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's Prosperity Party. The economic reform of the nation aims to achieve the goals of putting Ethiopia as one of the middle-income economies in the world soon.
Generally, to guarantee the general economic growth and rebuild locations damaged by the rebels and also to prepare for any future challenges, we call upon every citizen of this great nation to join hands.
Ethiopia's economy is in serious need of foreign direct investments to kickstart recovery. And for that, the government is calling on international investors to put their money on its manufacturing, agriculture and services sectors. And there is already good news as authorities here say that FDI is now flowing from Chinese, Turkish and Indian investors to the country. Grumtana CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now, China's Foreign Affairs Minister Wang Yi is currently in the Comoros Islands. But before that, he was in Kenya. He met President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta in Mombasa. The two countries signed 6 memorandums of understanding covering a broad range of issues. Trade and infrastructure were the focus there. China's foreign minister, the Kenyan president, also visited the new Kipevu oil terminus. It's a near $400 million project. CGTN's Nick Mudimba was there. He filed this report from Mombasa.
Another sign of fruits of the growing ties between Kenya and China. This is the new Kipevu oil terminus that's being constructed in Mombasa. President Uhuru Kenyatta and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi visited the new facility, which, when completed, will double the capacity of transit petroleum products handled there from the current 35,000 tons. It's being financed by the Kenya Ports Authority and constructed by the China Communication Construction Company. The new Kipevu oil terminal will ease operations at the port. More ships will now be able to dock, and of course, without a doubt, oil capacity storage will now be improved. When finished, the new oil terminal will handle up to 4 vessels at a time, up from the current 1 vessel being handled by the old facility.
Today, I want to thank our partners, the People's Republic of China, for being there and walking with us hand in hand and meeting us at our point of need. And I am sure that as we move forward, with the kind of pace of development that we now have achieved, we will be able to say we have achieved an end to poverty. Kenya, Africa does not need lectures. Kenya, Africa needs friends willing to work with us to achieve our goals and our aspirations.
Kenya is currently undertaking many infrastructure projects, including major roads, with the support of China. The Chinese foreign minister took issue with false reports surrounding the nature of the funding of such mega projects.
非洲债务陷阱的说法。
The so-called debt is certainly not a fact. It is speculation being played out by some with ulterior motives. It's a narration by those who do not want to see development in Africa. If there is any trap, it is poverty and underdevelopment. China would like to welcome other countries friendly towards Africa to eliminate poverty.
But it's not just infrastructure where Kenya has benefited from Chinese support. The health sector too got a boost. Foreign Minister Wang Yi announced a further donation of 10 million vaccines to Kenya, a gift that's been warmly welcomed by the government.
China agreed, I believe, to donate 10 million doses? 10 million doses of vaccine under the planned 1 billion additional doses of COVID-19 vaccines to Africa.
And more cooperation between China and Kenya is the pipeline. The two countries signed 6 memorandums of understanding during Wang Yi's visit, including those touching on infrastructure, trade and investments. 6 Kenyan cabinet secretaries took part in the talks. China has also pledged more support for Kenya and neighboring countries in securing the continent and the Horn of Africa region in particular.
To support the Horn of Africa in realizing long-term security and stability, peace and transparency, China would like to put forward our thinking on peace and development in the Horn of Africa to support regional countries in tackling challenges in 3 areas, namely security, development and governance. We suggest that countries in this region may convene a conference on peace in the Horn of Africa in order to discuss in depth on this matter, to shape political consensus and to coordinate actions. China will appoint a special envoy of the Foreign Ministry on the affairs of Horn of Africa to provide necessary support for this process.
Kenyan avocado farmers are expected to benefit from protocols put in place from the export of the crop to China. Other strategic partnerships that were bolstered during Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit include standing firmly to defeat COVID-19, to defend national sovereignty, continue to engage and play a bigger role for peace and stability in the region, working together to implement the FOCAC pledges and working hand in hand in poverty alleviation. Nick Mudimba, CGTN, Mombasa, Kenya.
A little earlier, my colleague spoke to Wenping He. She's a research fellow at the Institute of West Asian and African Studies at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. This was her perspective on the importance of China's relationship with economies here in Africa.
And the political, those mutual trust, and also like human, people to people, this communication. So I can say in all kinds of ways. For example, in terms of this economic cooperation, China has been now served as the #1 trade partner with Africa ever since 2009. If we look about China's benefit, of course, first of all, I think this is a mutually beneficial thing for China and Africa. But if we focus on China's side, I think first of all, we benefited a lot from this closer and closer China-Africa relations, those deeper and deeper China-Africa friendship. So that's why, you know, we have been working so closely and in terms of a lot of issues, even in the international stage, like we both calling for the multilateralism, we are against those protectionism. So we both like calling for the deeper this economic globalization rather than saying de-link or decouple between those countries. So this is the one of the beneficial things. China now we would like to continue to strengthen our closer relation with Africa. And in terms of like economic cooperation, China also benefit, like lots of Chinese companies, entrepreneurships, they have been getting stronger in the way they engage themselves in the African, those projects. So Chinese companies going out this process, I think has been developed and getting stronger, with those projects finished in Africa continent. If we focus on mutually beneficial way, I think maybe 2 things we can focus more. #1 is we need to spend more efforts to strike a trade balance. That is to import more African-made those commodities. For example, I have already noticed that a lot of African companies, like lots of African countries, now they join this Shanghai Import Expo that has been, kicked off in China, the Shanghai city, ever since 2018. So China also now aims to transform ourselves from like a world factory to a world market. So Chinese customer is there, is ready. Now they are becoming the middle class and has a quite strong consuming capacity.
The central bank has announced the extension of a raft of measures adopted in mid-2020 to mitigate the damage inflicted by the pandemic on the North African economy. Now, those measures include fee waivers as well as room for banks to extend the maturity of loans, among other measures. Yasser Kim reports this latest extension runs until the end of June.
The measures that have been extended by the central bank till mid-2022 include exempting clients from all fees and commissions on transactions in Egyptian pounds from banks, ATMs, mobile and e-wallets, as well as opening new accounts for free. The move is part of a comprehensive plan to soften the effects of the coronavirus pandemic on the Egyptian economy.
Suspending or extending loan repayments and waiving fees is a very positive initiative, whether for small investors or the public. It helps the development process to be sustained, consumption rates to grow, and positively reflects on investments.
The initiative is one of several others launched by the central bank to support various sectors of the economy to navigate through the downturn caused by the COVID-19 pandemic since its outbreak in Egypt in March 2020.
One of the important initiatives by the central bank is supporting the small and medium-sized businesses to survive the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. Another initiative is funding the food subsidy programs, extending payment facilities for loans for employees affected by the pandemic, and payouts for the unemployed.
These facilities by the CBE have also encouraged more people to engage with banks, leading to a 15% increase in the number of Egyptians opening new accounts in 2021 and giving a boost to the financial inclusion strategy that's aimed at luring the informal economy into the financial sector. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. President Joe Biden calls out his predecessor, Donald Trump, over the attack on the Capitol 1 year ago. And the raging COVID-19 pandemic is threatening to cloud the next phase of Brexit talks. The details coming up next.
Change is on the horizon. Through the shifting of time, Africa's emerging tech landscape is creating new channels.
There's a hunger for local African content globally.
Shaped by innovation, carved out by a new generation of digital entrepreneurs, sculpted by a mobile revolution, trickling down to the most remote corners of the continent. TechSpot is seeking out the new concepts in technology, disrupting Africa's traditional sectors.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate
those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back to the program. Let's head outside the continent now. The US President Joe Biden is calling out his predecessor Donald Trump, saying he carries singular responsibility for the deadly attack on Capitol Hill a year ago. President Joe Biden has said that the rioters who stormed the US Capitol on the 6th of January 2021 effectively held a dagger at the throat of America and American democracy. While marking the first anniversary of the event, Mr. Biden said the rioters came in rage and also in the service of one man. He accused his predecessor, Donald Trump, of spreading a web of lies that led to the attack on the Congress building. More than 700 people so far have been arrested in connection with the January 6 riots. Investigations do continue into what the Trump administration knew and did in the days before and after the assault.
You can't love your country only when you win. You can't obey the law only when it's convenient. You can't be patriotic when you embrace and enable lies. Those who stormed this Capitol, and those who instigated and incited, and those who called on them to do so, held a dagger at the throat of America and American democracy. They didn't come here out of patriotism or principle. They came here in rage, not in service of America, but rather in service of one man, the former president, who lies about this election. And the mob that attacked this Capitol could not be further away from the core American values. They want to rule, or they will ruin.
All right, then let's explore what's going on in respect to Jan 6th, a year on. Nathan King joins us now with the latest on the day's event. So, Nathan, at least 738 people that we know of so far have been charged by December. 165, I believe, have pleaded guilty. But what about the high-level public figures? Steve Bannon, the former president, why are they not yet held to account? Are there challenges in doing so?
Well, a year on from the insurrection coup attempt, putsch, whatever you want to call it, I think that is the central question. Look, Merrick Garland, the chief law enforcement officer of the US, the Attorney General, gave a press conference about 24 hours before we heard Joe Biden's remarks and essentially said, look, patience, we are doing these low-level cases first because they help lead to the higher-level cases. And remember, there is also a big effort here on Capitol Hill. There's a select committee of the House of Representatives looking into much of the political instigation and who was behind it and the timeline there. They've already had testimony from a lot of people behind closed doors and some cooperation, although very limited, for former Trump administration officials like Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, who released some texts before not complying anymore, which essentially show a barrage of Trump supporters saying, stop this. There are also other indications from key Trump staffers. Peter Navarro, for example, had a very strange television interview where he basically laid out what the plan was, essentially, from the White House, which was to get the Congress to basically throw the election back to state houses, of which the swing states are controlled by Republicans. We're talking about the ones that Biden won to become president. So all this has to be looked into. It's a little bit more complicated than just say you threw this then or you hit this policeman, etc., etc. But there is a real fear, especially among a lot of Democrats, that this is going to be sort of brushed onto the carpet in the normal sort of Washington Beltway fashion. But both the Attorney General and in President Biden's speech, which, let's face it, was a pretty powerful one. He's used to backslapping and congratulating fellow members of Congress and senators and former presidents. He went after Donald Trump today, and that laid down a marker that January the 6th and its events, not just the perpetrators, the 750 plus that you were talking about, but the political influence behind the scenes, the fundraising, who did what when and who did not do what when, is going to be very much in focus of his administration, the Justice Department, going forward.
Indeed. So let's focus on that January 6th committee, the one essentially working in the House. 7 Democrats, 2 Republicans on that particular group. They've been investigating these events for months now.
Yeah.
Do we have any sense of when they're going to make the findings public, especially keeping in mind that we've got the midterms coming up in November?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very much cognizant on the minds of the Democratic majority, both in the House and on that select committee, that essentially they could lose their majority. They only have about 5 in the House of Representatives in the midterm elections. So they're going to wrap it up before then. We've heard a lot of private testimony. There's been a lot of collecting of evidence. We are about to go into the public testimony phase, where people are going to be called and give evidence in front of television cameras. Now, we don't have exact dates on that, but we understand in the next couple of weeks at least. That's going to be the most riveting part. But still, the question, as you rightly say, is there have been subpoenas handed out to Mark Meadows, for example, the former chief of staff of the White House, to Steve Bannon, the former advisor and media guru, savant on the right wing, both of which now have criminal contempt charges hanging over them for not complying. Others are complying, although quietly, and others won't. The big question is, will Donald Trump be called, or any of his relatives who held senior positions in the administration? We know that he was watching the events of January 6th on television. We know there were several meetings at the Willard Hotel, the Trump Hotel, in the Oval Office in the days leading up to it, and also the big lie that stemmed from the November 3rd election. The question is, will they connect the dots and say, as President Biden said today, Donald Trump is responsible, and here's how we should proceed. It's going to be a fascinating few months, and you can imagine won't decrease the polarity, the division that we see in this town between Democrats and Republicans.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that leads me to my next question. A Quinnipiac poll, this was done in October last year, and it essentially asked if the assault on the Capitol was deemed as an attack on the government. 93% of Democrats agreed, only 29% of Republicans did so. I mean, this is slightly perplexing to anyone outside the US, but what explains this stark divide?
I just think it's the times we live in. Look, there's always been rhetoric in American politics, but we've seen a deep divisions on many levels. The media has just got worse and worse in this country. It's almost like two tribes when you click your channel changer between the cable news shows. I try not to, as often as possible. Working in the news, the rest of the American news is very depressing in terms of the rhetoric. But also, you've got to face it. The last 4 years, we had a president who basically told lies every day and went after his political rivals, both across the aisle and even with his own camp when they weren't loyal to him. That did help, I think, tip the balance towards a massive amount of intolerance here in this country. We had brutal slayings of African Americans in the streets, the demonstrations that flowed out of their deaths. But we still don't have resolution when it comes to legislation, when it comes to voting or police violence. All these things are not done because Congress is as divided as the country and everyone just sits on the other's majority. It really is a democracy, but it's really paralyzed. And you see that frustration bubbling up. Add to it a pandemic that's gone on, going into its 3rd year, economic dislocation for many, and you don't have a recipe for a smooth running democracy.
Indeed. Gridlock, gridlock, gridlock. Let's see how this plays out over the rest of the year. Nathan King there in Washington, D.C. Now, still in the United States, the U.S. Federal Reserve is likely to accelerate the pace of interest rate hikes this year, according to the minutes of its December 2021 rate-setting meeting. Now, that decision stems from the continued uneasiness of the country's high inflation rate, part of which, of course, Nathan alluded to there. Fed officials do believe that faster than expected short-term rate hikes are needed in order to respond not just to inflation, but also a relatively tight labour market. A majority of Fed officials expect at least 3 or so rate hikes this year, amid talks of when it would start shrinking its $8.76 trillion bond portfolio. Analysts also expect the impact of the current surge of COVID cases on the US economy to be at least a little weaker than expected. Now, as the UK wrestles with the latest wave of the pandemic, troubled Brexit negotiations move yet into another year. According to the polls, the British public remains as broadly and as evenly divided today as it was on referendum day back in 2016. The Northern Ireland Protocol, that still dominates a long list of flashpoints. It covers everything from immigration to fisheries and the prospects for UK sectors that once relied on a lot of international workers. Andrew Wilson takes a look at what lies ahead for the Brexit process in 2022.
2021 ended with plenty of tension on display between the UK and its former partners in Europe. On fisheries, on immigration, and the Northern Ireland Protocol, which still threatens to undo decades of progress in the region. Behind the scenes, weekly negotiations still suggest a way will be cleared to address these issues, but nothing is certain.
That's the optimistic scenario. But the sort of febrile nature of British politics at the moment means to say we cannot necessarily assume that there will be a positive outcome, and there's a lot of momentum behind, at least rhetorically, around triggering Article 16 and essentially the UK stepping back from a good number of its obligations under the protocol.
Article 16 allows either party to unilaterally abandon parts of the protocol if it feels economically threatened. It's supposed to be a nuclear option, but it's still on the table. It's not clear if the sudden resignation in December of the UK's chief negotiator, David Frost, will hinder or help relations or the process. Equally, the abilities of his replacement, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss, are yet to be tested. And going into 2022, certain sectors continue to struggle with jobs. Hospitality is one, as well as healthcare and agriculture. And of course, transportation and supply chains. Brexit supporters blame the pandemic for this, but even special visas haven't helped. And there's no doubt that immigration, including the migrant crisis in the Channel, has reshaped post-Brexit British political discourse. Coming out of the pandemic in 2022, business leaders might grow impatient over these issues. But even British politics itself has a long way to go to recover from a national decision taken over 5 years ago.
It still divides the country, it still divides the parties as well. And so the implications could be with us for some time. Labour and the Conservatives really haven't resolved the difficulties they both have in their parties around people who support them traditionally and yet do not support the position that they adopted on Brexit.
The new year finds Boris Johnson fighting another battle on the pandemic front, but that won't last forever. And if Brexit 2022 sows more discontent at home than it does progress, then the government and the Prime Minister may well be left facing some awkward questions. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
Now, the world's largest personal electronic show is officially kicked off in Las Vegas, returning to the in-person format it's always had compared to last year's fully virtual event. CGTN's Mark New has all the latest and greatest tech from Las Vegas on what's hot tonight.
CES opening day typically produces a mad rush to be first to the exhibit booths. This year, it's socially distancing and relative calm, a far cry from previous year crowds of 170,000 people. But many are just happy the show happened at all.
I am absolutely thrilled to get back to being with people who are focusing on innovation in a very big way.
While numerous big tech companies like Microsoft and Amazon pulled out of in-person events, Sony continued its traditional Media Day show. Spider-Man and Sony Pictures star Tom Holland made a special appearance introducing his new movie Uncharted, which is based on a video game.
I think when you watch this film, you'll really feel the authenticity of the action and the fighting and the stunts, and nothing will seem fake.
Sony also revealed yet another ambition. On my left, you can see the Vision S EV concept car that was shown before, but they just unveiled the Vision S number 2 model. Very few details on specifications, but it all goes to show how tech companies are unafraid to cross into new frontiers.
During CES week, the popular digital experience Pepcom show brought into focus the connected virtual world known as the metaverse. Shanghai-born Weili Dai is the co-founder of the multi-billion-dollar semiconductor solutions company Marvell Technology. She's now the co-founder of half a dozen startups, including Meet Kai, which brings artificial intelligence into the metaverse.
The metaverse virtual world is become unlimited, unbounded. How many places we can reach? Very limited our lifetime. But with the metaverse of virtual, through the VI devices with our AI technology, now we could automate our lifestyle. So now the virtual you go check out other places before the physical you to select a place, buy a ticket together.
Dai says while it can be fun and games, her mission is to develop technology that can better someone's life.
What pace should my breathing be at?
How do you help the elderly, for example? People that as they get older, right? It's very hard for them to reach a lot of physical space. In the VR, our intelligent software, now they can, with the VR devices, and they can travel around the world.
While the pandemic forces this year's exhibitors to keep socially distant in limited space, new tech is working to increase our activity into ever-expanding worlds. Mark New, CGTN, Las Vegas.
Plenty of interesting tech coming out of this year's event. Let's run through commodity prices. So there's a ton of red ink on most of the commodities we track on the program, from the 7.10% fall in copper forwards at the London metals markets to the 2.1% fall in spot platinum prices. Brent crude, however, and WTI as well, they're the exceptions to that trend. Brent was up nearly 2% to over $82 a barrel. That's certainly going to sting if you're essentially an oil importer. If you're an oil exporter like Nigeria, however, party time is on now. According to the FAO, though, food prices were hitting over a 10-year high in 2021, despite a small decline in December. Across the year, maize and wheat prices are up 44% and 31% compared to the averages in 2020. Rice, in fact, was the only grain to see a decline. Vegetable oils also hit an all-time high in the FAO's data set. Here's what's coming up next. When we come back, we'll showcase the story of a wastepreneur in Uganda who's turning plastic waste into fashionable works of art.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Adventure Tunis, Cairo, Syria, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Let's turn our attention to Uganda. One entrepreneur over there, Faith Aweko, has seen an opportunity to turn plastic waste into fashion. Now, Aweko's firm collects discarded waste and converts that into durable and sustainable handbags. That provides a partial solution to the plastic waste problem in the East African state by diverting some plastic waste that would otherwise end up littering the city and clogging vital sewer systems.
Kampala, Uganda's capital, churns out 1,000 tons of garbage per day, according to the National Environment Management Authority. But what many see as trash was viewed as a solution-based business opportunity, turning plastic waste from landfill sites into fashionable handbags.
I like to call myself a wastepreneur because I deal in waste, and this is something that most people don't want to associate with waste, plastics, dump sites, garbage, and yet this is something that is providing employment to women who are collecting the waste, to women who are sorting, to women who are washing, and also women who are processing and making the beautiful bags that Reform Africa is making. And then we are also able to provide an income for ourselves and the other employees. And I'm also championing in saving the environment.
The Reform Africa team regularly collects, washes and hangs out discarded plastic bags from Kampala's dump sites. Aweko has employed 8 women whom she trained and hired from the surrounding community.
I am very happy with this job because it has transformed my life very much. It has created a living for me and my child. I am now also able to assist my spouse when he's struggling. This job has really helped me. The other thing I like about it is that we empty communities of these polythene bags, which saves the environment.
Once the bags are clean and dry, Aweko uses what she calls a heat presser to flatten and fuse them together. The pieces are then cut into patterns and stitched together to create colorful bags and accessories. Aweko's bags sell for between $16 and $25 in local shops and international markets, while using social media platforms to land more clients. Aweko is a graduate of the Social Innovation Academy outside of Kampala, which helps young aspiring social entrepreneurs take their ideas to the market.
We have shops both here in Uganda and also in Europe. In Uganda here we have 6 shops, 4 in Kampala and 2 upcountry that retail our products on a commission base. And we also do wholesale to international market. We have over 8 shops that wholesale our products. That's in America and also in Europe.
Aweko says the jobs and positive effect on the environment she is creating more than make up for all the hard work and criticism. Part of her vision for the Reform Africa project is to encourage more Ugandans to recycle and help people learn new income-generating skills. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Right, and a quick run through the currencies. Kenya's weekly debt auction, that's our starting point. It got off to a slightly tepid start. A 96% performance rate for the $212 million in short-term notes that the Treasury looked to raise. The 182-day paper was especially undersubscribed. Bids were skewed on the other end of the spectrum. The 91-day note with a weighted average of 7.34% and the 364-day one with a rate of 9.4%. In West Africa, the Naira does continue to recover from its brief excursion north of the 427 line. It was down to 415.59 in interbank market today. Those are your currencies, and that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen here in the last hour. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today's up next from Washington, D.C.